You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. She's achieved a level of mastery as the singer for the Juno-nominated band Joydrop. She's been a finalist on the TV show Rockstar in Excess. She was the co-host of Rogers Hometown Hockey with Ron McLean, and she's currently with the San Jose Sharks as a host and content contributor. So welcome to the podcast, Tara Slone. Tara, how are you? And how much has your baseline level of happiness been raised over the last few months since you've got your adorable dog, Archie?
I am going to tell you that, yeah, I had the initial like, oh my God, puppies are really a lot of work. What people say is true. It's kind of like having a baby. But he is a wonderful, wonderful dog. So baseline has definitely gone up at least 50%.
And was this something planned in advance? You knew you wanted for years to get a dog, or was it just like the pandemic happens, people make crazy decisions, and here's this cute dog?
No, he was post-pandemic. This was a result of, I think, a couple of things. I have a teenage daughter who's been begging me for years. There's no part of me that fully believed her when she said, oh, don't worry, I'll help with everything. I'll do everything. I'll feed him. I'll train him. Obviously, I'm not new. I'm not that naive. So, but I maybe thought she would do a little more than she's ended up doing. But it was really, she really wanted a dog in our lives. And for me, it was just the first time in my adult life where I've had the stability. I've had such a weird schedule for so many years. So it's the first time really I'm not traveling. I'm not waking up at crazy hours. So I'm around enough to make it work. So he's been a great addition.
And your daughter is many years away from ever moving out. But if ever she moves out, is this dog hers or is this dog yours? Or is this, we got to bring in the lawyers? It's debatable.
I think we'll see, but this dog is definitely mine. Definitely mine.
Don't let your daughter watch this podcast episode. I like to start off these interviews by sharing with our listeners how the guests and I know each other to show the importance of networking, of building community, of fostering relationships. So in our case, it goes back just a few months. So I had your fellow bandmate, your BFF, I had Tony Ravelau on the podcast, and I reached out to you to see if you could provide some kind words so we could get Tony right in the feels. And we definitely did. So thank you for providing those kind words. It made the episode better, and you could tell that he was very touched by what you said. So that was the start of us being in the same universe. And after every podcast, I asked the guest, hey, can you think of anyone that would make for an amazing upcoming guest? And not one, but two people recommended you. So Tony recommended you, and Rich Bedeau, former drummer, Finger 11 and Saint Asonia, both of those guys said, you got to get Tara on. She's amazing. She has great stories. So here we are today.
Well, that's really nice of those guys to think of me as being interesting. So, yeah, Tony's, you said BFF. That's not an exaggeration. He's one of my closest, dearest, forever friends. And Rich and I haven't seen Rich in many years, but he and I were close back in the day, and I love him a lot.
Amazing. So we're going to do a full 2-hour deep dive. We're going to cover your life, your career, your discography, everything you're up to nowadays in the hockey world. But we got to go all the way back to the beginning. So can you remember, is there an earliest musical memory? Where does this passion for music come from?
I definitely place it squarely on my dad. My dad grew up in Montreal and ultimately became a lawyer, but he was in bands all through high school and into university. And it really was his dream to be a rock star. I think there was like some brush with a producer who had produced Bob Dylan, and like they had some kind of showcase in New York City. Anyway, my dad was like, he wanted to do that. And so even though it didn't become his full-time career, he has always done music. He writes songs, he plays guitar. He's got a studio in his house currently. So when I was a kid, I think music was just all around me because of him. He also, when he was in law school, and I was, I don't know, under 5, probably 3 or 4. This People will not necessarily understand this reference, but he was in a barbershop quartet. They were called Bora and the Supremes, which was a reference to Bora Laskin, who I believe was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. It's like such a law thing. It's such a law reference. But so, they would have their practices at our house. And so I just, I think I picked it up from him, and I love to sing. And I don't remember this, but he always tells a story of me kind of muscling my way in at the age of 3 at an open mic at York University in Toronto. And apparently I stole the shit. So I guess it was then. But it's, just all around me.
And do you think he lived vicariously through you with the success you had in your music career?
I don't know about vicariously, but I mean, I think he certainly supported me. I felt very lucky. My whole family, just nobody ever said, "Oh, I don't think you could make a go of that." Everybody was always behind me. I think my dad, was a little bit more invested, and he's a bit of a worrywart. So, I remember for me, I really wanted to hit certain markers, to impress him, to let him know that it was the real deal.
And do you remember any of the music that your dad or your mom might have played around the house when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, absolutely. A lot of Beatles, a lot of Beatles. A lot of the band that was big in our house. I remember I lived with my mom for a period of time when I was young, and there were a few records that were really big. I remember sitting in front of the record player and listening to the best of the Eagles, listening to Saturday Night Fever. And then a lot of classical music too. Just a really good big variety. And then as soon as, videos came into the picture, I was completely I couldn't tear myself away.
Can we acknowledge your parents' great taste in music? I mean, they could have been playing horrible stuff, but they were playing the greatest music of all time.
Yeah, they were. And a lot of Jethro Tull too, weirdly. Yeah.
That's too funny. And what age would you say that you started getting a little bit more serious about singing? So you can remember back to say 3 years old where you started singing a bit, but later on you kind of, maybe started taking lessons and that kind of thing.
I joined choirs really early. And then I think when I was 8, I probably did my first Kiwanis Music Festival, competition as a soloist. So that's when it was kind of like, oh, I think I'm, my pitch is good. My tone is good. And then I started taking singing lessons probably when I was 11 or 12, and it became much more serious.
Rumor has it one of your original goals was to become an opera singer. Is this true or is this fake news?
No, it's 100% true. My focus in terms of singing was never pop music or rock music at that age. Even though I listened to rock music, I didn't think I had that tone. And I'd always taken classical singing lessons. So I actually started at Dalhousie University in their vocal performance program. And I mean, I blew that. Like I just blew it. I did not have the discipline at, excuse me, at the age of 18. But yeah, that was what I was going to do.
And which were the singers that were your biggest influences growing up? So once you started singing and becoming passionate about singing, who were the singers that were already out there having success that you looked to and thought, man, if I dedicate my life to this, that is the pinnacle of what I could achieve?
Well, I mean, in the classical world, it's totally different. Like I had people that I felt like were my kind of musical idols, but I don't think I was able to, I didn't even think about emulating them because I didn't sing pop or rock music. So when I was growing up, it was Deborah Harry, it was Chrissie Hynde, it was Annie Lennox, it was David Bowie. But I didn't realize I wasn't taking, their example yet, because I was singing classical music. And so I was listening to Kathleen Battle and Jesse Norman and people, real like classical virtuosos. But later on, when I started to develop my pop / rock, whatever kind of voice, my chest voice, that's when those musical examples came into my life.
So you were born in Montreal, but you grew up in Nova Scotia. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was born in Montreal. Both my parents are Montrealers. Lived in Toronto a little bit as, like age 3, 4. My dad was going to law school. Then my parents split when I was pretty young, and I lived with my mom and my stepfather. My stepfather was a computer science professor. So the reason we ended up in Nova Scotia was he got a job at Acadia University. So I lived in Wolfville for a bit, moved back to Toronto with my dad, and then moved to Halifax with my mom, and then my dad moved to Halifax too. So I kind of stuck around.
And how much do you think the moving around and being in each of those different cities shaped you as a person and maybe as a musician?
I mean, it's hard to say because you're in it, so I don't know. But I mean, a lot. Halifax for me was absolutely instrumental. First of all, I worked at Sam the Record Man all through high school, so I was very much exposed to not just the Halifax music scene, which was entering its real heyday, with like Slone and Jail and bands like that, but also just working in a record store, like, just having so much music, access to so much music around me. So for sure, Halifax influenced me big time. I moved to Montreal for school, and I continued to work at Sam the Record Man. But also I just saw so many concerts, and this was the early 90s. So, I had access also to just, I would see like Nirvana and Bad Brains and the Ramones in like the span of a week. It was crazy. So absolutely. It was like those cities were the best cities to be in, especially at, that young age for me. That was so formative, and where you don't have anything else tying you down and you could just be out at shows every night.
Before falling in love with music, was there anything as a kid that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Nope.
Just music was the first thing you truly loved that you were passionate.
Yeah. I mean, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a lawyer like my dad, but there was no part of me that ever actively pursued. Like, it's not like I took any of the classes in high school that might have helped me achieve that.
If I met you at 12 years old, who would I be meeting?
12 that was one of the hardest years of my life. 7th grade, it was like that. I don't want to say the ugly duckling, but like,
were you awkward like the rest of us going into high school?
I was awkward. I was trying to find my style. I was trying to find my self, my confidence. And so I remember I went to a new school in Toronto. I did not have a good time socially. I definitely was the victim of bullying. For me, the way that I dealt with that, though, is I just dove headlong into the extracurricular activities I was involved in. Luckily, I did that instead of withdraw. I just kind of just did other stuff. So I sang a lot. I just did everything I could do in school. My grades were really good. So I was like I wasn't a nerd, but I coped through overachieving.
And do you think those challenges that you went through around 12 years old, do you think that helps you with your daughter going through that age to understand if she's going through a tough time?
Yeah, I think it really does. Kids have changed in certain ways because there are different influences. Obviously, social media, I think, has made things so much worse. But I know what it's like being on the opposite end of, of a bully. And I feel like I know how kids think, and I know how kids relate. I mean, we've all gone through it, but definitely having had a difficult time socially for a couple of years. So I get it.
Yeah, social media has made things hard for everyone in certain aspects because you're always comparing to people's bests and you're seeing kind of final products out there. And if you're at the start of something, you're like, man, I'll never be that good. I'll never look like that. My body will never be like that. But I hear that for young girls, like teenagers, that social media is the hardest for them because they're seeing these impossible beauty standards just nonstop. And it's, there's the filters that make people that already look good look even better. Do you find there's any truth to that?
Oh, it's 100% true. Yes, there's the impossible standards. There's the fact that, all of these apps, their algorithms, they listen. So if you had a kid, who was clicked one TikTok video about restrictive eating, for instance, they'll start getting suggestions about how to lose weight. And so it really feeds into this social neurosis. And then there's just the fact that everybody's available all the time. They're all on group texts or group Snapchats or whatever it is. So there's no escape. So if you're having a bad time in school, you also get to have a bad time on your device all through the night. So
Yeah.
I think it's really, really toxic.
Yeah, they say comparison is the thief of joy, and all you're getting is nonstop comparison with social media. So that's tough. You mentioned that being in Montreal, you had like unlimited access to amazing concerts. Can you remember the very first concert that you attended?
In life?
Just period. I don't know how young
Yes.
you were. It was probably
Yeah,
your
yeah.
parents.
I was 11. I mean, the first concert I probably went to see like something where I, at a soft seater when I was in elementary school, but my first show, I went to see Paul Young at Massey Hall in Toronto with my dad. I was 11 and I loved him. I thought he was so handsome. So it was really fun.
That's not bad. Your first show is at arguably the greatest venue in the world, right? Massey Hall is so
Yeah.
legendary and sounds great. I've seen Death Cab for Cutie there. I've seen who else? I saw Bon Iver there. I've seen so many Ryan Adams. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember at one point, I'm like the worst seat in the house. Like all the seats are good there, but I'm like the worst seat in the house. And one of the artists, I think it was, who was it? Anyways, one of those three artists came out just with an acoustic guitar and sang, and it sounded like they were sitting beside me. It
Mm.
sounded like it wasn't even amplified. So I don't know what wizardry they have going on with the audio there, but it's amazing.
I love it there. My only bad experience there was I went to see Flight of the Conchords, who I adore, but I think I was like 8 months pregnant and they hadn't redone Massey. So the chairs were literally the most uncomfortable chairs I've ever been in. But that was it. I mean, I've seen Sigur Rós there. I saw Todd Rundgren there. I don't even know how many shows I've seen there. It's
Flight of the Concords,
special.
that's the comedy duo, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
From New Zealand. Yeah.
That's awesome. If you and I were friends at 16 and you invited me over to listen to music, what albums would you be spinning at 16?
It would be super eclectic. 16, trying to like place, I probably get a little bit confused, but I had already started to fall in love with, alternative music at that point. Um, Again, I fully credit Sam the Record Man and that job. So I was probably listening to some local EPs like Eric's Trip and stuff like that. Definitely listening to some older Chili Peppers at that point. A lot of kind of skater music, Bad Religion, just like all over the place.
Like
And then
Goldfinger?
not Goldfinger, but I really like, and I like Bad Brains a lot. I like early Green Day. I'm trying to think of what else, but I also listen to like a lot of hip hop, like CKDU, which was the college station in Halifax. Played a lot of hip hop, so my tastes were all over the map, and a lot of vocal jazz and a lot of classical.
And do you think that eclectic taste in music helped you as a musician so that it's like you could borrow great ideas from all
Mm-hmm.
different genres and artists instead of kind of being stuck if all you listen to is metal, if that's all you're taking from?
Yeah, I take pride in having a broad musical. My dog is going at a pillow right now. Um, I take pride in my sort of vast, musical taste. Again, I'm super grateful for just having had that made available to me.
And did you play in a bunch of bands growing up, or was Joydrop kind of the start of that?
No, I didn't think I could sing that kind of music. I listened to it, but I didn't think I could sing it. My first band was when I moved to Montreal. The timeline is I went to Dalhousie University, did one semester, completely screwed it up. Um, took some time off and I moved to Montreal and just was working at Sam the Record Man there before I went back to school. So my first band was a band called Laverne. Um, a guy I work with at Sam's, his name's PJ Kennedy. We're still good friends. He had some other musical friends, and I was the singer in their band. And, we played local shows. Like, I think we're actually pretty good, but I didn't have any idea that people would do this as, for a living. Come here. Let's get my dog up here.
Hey, he's nice and quiet though, so that's good.
He is, but he's starting to be up to no good. Um, yeah, so I didn't think of it as something that I would do in any long-term way. We played for beer, basically. We had fun.
Hey, you could play for worse things than beer, right? So, hey, you can
Yeah,
rack up quite the tab just on beer. So,
that's true. Although back in those days in Montreal, it was pretty cheap for Boreal Rousse.
yeah, I remember I went to school for audio engineering in London, Ontario, and I remember there were bars where it was like $2 a beer. Like you would just grab, I don't know, 8 beer with all your fingers, and you'd be the life of the party just handing out beer to people. So times have changed because it's like $15 a drink when I go to a hockey game now. So it's not
Yeah,
easy.
no kidding. No kidding.
So is it true that you actually pursued a career in acting before music? Because I see there's credits in plays, there's credits in TV shows, and that came before Joydrop, I believe.
Yeah, again, I really didn't see music as a viable option career-wise. I mean, opera I had, and that was but no, so what happened was, I moved to Montreal, took some time to figure out what I was going to do, and then I went to theater school at Concordia University. And so I worked and got some jobs in TV and film and theater in Montreal, and then did what a lot of actors do in Canada and moved to Toronto. Um, and it was while I was doing that, working in a restaurant or restaurants, plural, trying to get acting jobs, that I kind of started to miss music and looked for some, people just to play with. But again, not to like make it or get a record deal. I didn't even know what a record deal was, I don't think. I mean, I did, but I didn't know I could do that. So yeah, it happened sort of simultaneously. And then Joydrop is the thing that took off.
So let's dive into your career with Joydrop. So I have some kind words sent in from somebody that knows the Joydrop history more than anyone. So this is your BFF, Tony Rabelau, now drumming with Bedouin Soundclash, who's one of Canada's biggest bands, which is exciting. I saw them. They came and played Ottawa. They headlined the Dragon Boat Festival a few months ago. So I got to hang out with Tony and get some pics and say hi. And man, those guys are awesome. So here's what Tony has to say. He says, the day Tara Slone walked into our rehearsal room for a Joydrop audition 27 years ago, I knew our lives were going to change. We specifically stated in our Now magazine ad that we were looking for a rock goddess to join our band, not because we had unrealistic expectations, but we were hoping it would weed out those who were easily intimidated. That's pretty smart. Good job, Tony. Tara walked in with confidence, with passion, with enthusiasm. Everything fell into place after that. She is one of my dearest friends, and I've watched her go through life's up and downs head first with those very qualities and a fearlessness that is so inspiring. She's a hell of a front woman, smart, wise, compassionate, fearless, insightful, and all the qualities I mentioned above balance and express themselves beautifully in her love of music, hockey, the people around her, and in life in general. I love you, Slone, and consider myself so fortunate to have you, a rock goddess indeed, in my life. So that's from Tony.
Well, I absolutely feel the same. Yeah, I feel blessed to know him.
And does it feel like 27 years? You kind of freaked out when I said that.
I mean, it's just, yeah, it's such a big number. I mean, it does and it doesn't, like so many lifetimes have passed since that day. And I remember that day really, really well. Um, but yeah, it goes by in the blink of an eye as well. So, I mean, when you make friendships like that, it doesn't matter how long it's been since you've seen each other, like you'll always just pick up where you left off. So, but yes, there's a lot in between 27 years ago at Cherry Beach Studios in Toronto and now for sure.
And do you remember the moment that you saw that ad?
Yeah, because I had answered a couple of other ones and they were just kind of weird. Like people would give me a tape of their music and I'd be like, no, I don't think that's for me. I remember, and this like totally stereotyped, but I expected Tony to be Italian. Excuse me.
Tony.
Yeah, I thought anyway. I had no idea who I was answering, but I certainly, yeah, I felt a little cheeky, like, okay, I like that ad, Rock Goddess. Like, okay, I think I could be that. So I felt up to the task.
So you called, you set up an audition, or you set up to jam and meet them, and
Mhm.
and what happens?
So I remember thinking, and this was probably my way of like guarding myself in case it didn't work out. I remember thinking, well, they're auditioning me, but I'm auditioning them too, which is true because I didn't even know anything about them or their music or what it was going to be like. But yeah, I walked into such a pro setup. The rehearsal room was completely decked out, and they were very ready for me. It wasn't like let's jam and see what happens. It was I it was like, let us play you some songs. And then why don't you try to sing this? So they played a few songs. And then they played Beautiful. And I was like, oh, okay. This band. And I think they expressed kind of what they felt like their path was going to be, which I had never contemplated, like
They
we
had a
want to do
vision for
this.
the future.
Absolutely. We want to, rehearse our butts off, play some live shows. We have a manager. We have a producer lined up who's going to help us make a demo, and we're going to get a record deal. I was like, okay, wow. All right. But for me, it was the music, and it was Tony, Tom, Thomas, and then Tara. I just thought, well, it's all very meant to be.
And was it just the one audition and you got the gig? Did it take more than that?
My recollection is that was it. I feel like we maybe met up one more time, but I reached out very quickly. I knew that I knew I wanted to join that band. I didn't have to think about it. So I remember they're like, take your time. I think it was around Christmas maybe. And they're like, take your time. I'm like, no, I know.
And is it true that you guys had kind of like a workman-like quality where you looked at it as kind of a job where it's like Monday to
Yeah.
Friday, you'd get together and jam. And by the time you had shows lined up, you were a well-oiled live band?
Yeah. We worked our butts off. And that work ethic did not come from me. Tony and Tom really were steering the ship in that department. And it was the smartest thing that we could have done. Like they're, coming out of the gate, half cooked. I just mix my metaphors, but it's not going to work. You're not going to impress anyone. You have to come out and you have to impress immediately. And so we were, you would rise or fall to the level of your preparation. And we wanted to rise, and we did. But yeah, like rain or shine, whatever, we would be in that rehearsal room, just playing the songs, playing.
So each musician kind of has their own influences. But then when you get together as a band and there's four of you, are there specific influences that were there for the band as a whole for the sound of Joydrop? So maybe it's like taking a little bit from your love of, I don't know, David Bowie and whoever, and a little bit of Tony's love of whoever, and it meshes together to make the Joydrop sound.
I I don't think so. I mean, maybe probably at the production stage, I mean, the songs we wrote individually, almost exclusively. And so every song, had its own flavor based on its writer. But then we all worked the songs up. So for sure. I mean, I do think David Bowie is a good example of, somebody we would have been emulating at that point. And we all have really diverse tastes. And so, I can't off the top of my head say, oh yeah, we were trying to make it sound more, oh, dog. He's being really bad.
We can't hear anything on our end from the dog, so it's all good.
He's just knocking stuff over.
He's more distracting for you than anything, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure we had like, okay, let's make this a Muse sound, or, there were certain, it was the late 90s and early 2000s. So we would have had, also reference points from that time of like certain producers that we would have been listening to. And let's make it kind of like that.
Yeah, and with the amount of music created globally, it's really hard for a band to sound unique. Yet Joydrop has its own kind of signature sound. Was that important to the band, that we're not just going to be these copycats of someone else, that you were consciously striving to create something new and unique?
Yeah, absolutely. It would always be so irritating because people have so little imagination. Be like, you guys are kind of like garbage. And
just because it's a female
just because
singer,
it's an alternative band fronted by a woman. But no, I think, everybody in Joydrop, and, I was really the newbie when it came to songwriting, but all of them were so accomplished in their own ways and drew from so many different reference points. So yeah, they just had that sort of secret sauce because of the combination of the musicians.
I think the band name Joydrop is a great name. Is there a story behind that? Can you remember the origin story?
It existed when I walked into the room. They had already come up with it. I think, I remember thinking, oh, that's a bit like, light.
Too positive
Yeah,
for
but that was
angst-ridden music?
yeah, but that was the point. I think it was Tom's idea. Tom Mackay, bass player. And I think the idea was to have a positive spin on it. And I respect him for that. The more I kind of grew to know him and love him, like, I think that's really intentional for him.
You guys would go on to sign with Tommy Boy Records, which is massive label. Like years later, it sold for, I don't know, $100 million, like this massive, massive label. How did you attract the attention of that label?
So we were one of those, Canadian bands that couldn't really get much of a look in Canada, unfortunately. Or we got a look, but we didn't get any bites. And so we were like, okay, well, fuck it. Like, let's go to the States. So we did couple showcases in the US, in New York City. And we had tons of labels out, like 15 labels or something, good ones, Interscope, Mercury Records, like stuff like that. And when coming down to kind of the final, whoever, sort of the ones who were really, really interested, the reason that Tommy Boy was interesting to us was because they're a hip hop label and they were making their foray into rock music. So we felt like, okay, yes, they didn't have a ton of experience or a track record getting rock music out into the world, but we were going to be taken care of and we were going to be paid attention to because we were a bit of a first for them.
So in 1999, you guys released your first album, Metasexual. What thoughts, memories, emotions come back to you now when you think back to that debut album that really kickstarted this whole journey you've been on since then?
Hang on, I'm gonna give my dog a treat and I'll be able to tell you. Come here. Right. I'm gonna come up.
Can you make an appearance?
Yeah, probably. This is exactly what was not.
He's not going for it.
Oh no! I mean,
there he is.
Here he is. Yeah, he's a sweetie. I don't know if he's gonna stay. I may have to put him away. It was really complex. Like like I've said 50 times already. I feel like I just didn't understand it. I didn't think that that was a career path that I could even take. I don't think the work ethic was not instilled in me yet. It felt like a lot. Um, I loved it, and I also was not prepared for the road at all. And like Tony and Tom especially they were already touring musicians. They were workhorses. They knew what it would take to like get a record out there. And especially when you're at the beginning, you just have to play shows. And we were lucky enough to have tour support and have a record company that supported us. But we played hundreds of shows in, across North America, traveling in a 15-passenger van. And it was exhausting. And I was not ready for that. So, I mean, lots of fun, obviously really amazing and rewarding, and seeing a song, crack the top 10 alternative chart on Billboard was like, holy crap. Making videos, all that stuff. But I was profoundly tired. So there were some times where I think Tony and Tom, and I was younger than everybody else. So they were like, oh my God, I don't know if she can do it. I don't know if she's cut out for this. They were probably quite irritated with me at times. Rightfully so.
For our listeners that are not touring musicians, that do not understand that much about it, what were the challenges of being on the road so much?
Well, if you imagine, you're playing, say, for sure, we were doing at least 200 shows a year at that time. And so you are touring across, Canada's its own beast because the traveling
Especially
distances are so far. But you're playing a show at night. So say you play, let's use California as an example, because I can like kind of, imagine the stops. So say you have a show in LA. You play, the show, you load out late at night. Sometimes you have to wait till everything is done to actually load out. And we didn't have a crew at that time. So you're loading out, everybody's loading out. Depending on the distance, you might want to get a little bit of a drive done. Like say you're playing San Francisco the next night. Okay. So maybe you drive a little bit and stop halfway. More likely is you sleep in a motel. You wake up the next morning, you do the drive, 5, 6, but sometimes it's 7, 8, 9, 10-hour drives. You load in the afternoon, do a sound check, find dinner somewhere. Maybe check into another motel, maybe get a shower, do another show. And it just is every day. And when you have days off, you're usually doing a, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-hour drive. Their time is money. And so you don't have too many off days. So anyway, it's, it was grueling. And once we got a tour bus, everything became much, much easier. That really changed everything. Because you had somebody driving you and you'd wake up in the next town and you could have a day and some space. And then you're also like, it's like I'm in a van with all these smelly dudes. And you just like, it's super claustrophobic. You get tired of each other. But it's also one of those things that I can say I did. And I'm proud of myself for doing it. And for sure makes you tighter as a family.
And would the days kind of blur one into the next?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of notable shows, and we played everything from, I remember opening for They Might Be Giants at whatever the big park is in Atlanta, where they had the Olympic stuff. That was like 30,000 people. And then, also playing shows for like bar staff.
That's tough.
It runs the gamut.
And was it challenging vocally to play that many shows, knowing I can't even afford to get sick because that means a cancellation of a bunch of shows?
Yeah, it was. I would say I can really credit my classical training for being able to make it through tours. But being sick, yeah, you got to sing through a cold, and that was tough. We never missed a show. The closest we came to missing a show, and I really wanted to skip it, was I got myself completely sunburned in Florida, sunburned and like heat stroke. And so I was like sick. And anyway, I ended up doing the show. I think we did about 6 songs. I was sitting on a stool because I was burnt to a crisp and I couldn't even wear shoes. So anyway, live and learn.
So the song Beautiful is released as a single from that album. You mentioned a top 10 hit. It's a big hit single. Even to today, it's the band's most popular song on Spotify, almost 300,000 plays. Do you remember the first time you heard Beautiful on the radio? People have stories of like, oh, I pulled over and I cried, or like I showed my mom, or any. Do you remember the first time hearing it?
The first time I heard it, we knew it was going to come on because it was on one of those specialty shows on CFNY. People would know it as 102.1 The Edge. And so, yeah, I remember being in my little kitchen in my little apartment in Toronto. And I don't remember who the announcer was, but just being like, holy shit, man. But I also remember hearing it come out of a car driving by. And I was like, oh my God, that's nuts.
And why do you think people love that song so much? Why do you think it's the band's most popular song?
I mean, I think it's the message, which it really stands the test of time. It's about embracing your own unique qualities. And I mean, it's perfect for right now, especially what we're talking about with social media, right? It's like you could spend your life comparing yourself to others, but what makes everybody really special is their own unique themness.
So speaking of social media and speaking of people, why people love that song so much, we have a fan comment sent in. So this is from Mike Lamond, who's an artist that goes by Petty Cash. And you might remember this. He writes, oh my God. So I actually covered her song Beautiful on Insta a while back. And she reached out and told me she really enjoyed my version and thanked me for sharing. So very kind. Heart emoji. So that's from Mike Lamone. And he also provided a question that I'll ask you later on in the interview where it ties in better with wherever we're going to be at that point in the interview. So that's from Mike, just some kind words.
Nice. Yeah. It's always like really flattering when people cover the song or love the song or get the lyrics tattooed on their bodies, which happens sometimes too.
So Beautiful was a bigger hit in the US than Canada. And then we'll talk about the next album and Sometimes Wanna Die, which was reverse, which was a bigger hit in Canada than the US. Why do you think Beautiful was a bigger hit in the US?
I really don't know.
Was it the label being from the US focusing on the US?
I mean, they certainly, spent their dollars. I mean, we spent so much time in the United States touring, playing, making sure we're playing for, the record company people. So yeah, there definitely was a bigger investment made. But I just kind of think Canada was a little slow to embrace us.
Canada's like that. Nickelback had to break in the US and then they broke here. I'm trying to think of who else. But yeah, a lot of bands, it's like once they're big somewhere else, Canada's like, oh, wait, that's our band. And they take them back.
Yeah, it was a common story back then. Like you had to make it big in the US in order to make it in Canada. So yeah, I mean, we had some love, but yeah, it wasn't the same.
Is it true that in an alternate universe that the song Beautiful could have been in the movie American Beauty? Is there a story behind that everyone's still bitter about today?
I mean, bitter, except that, now Kevin Spacey, anything Kevin Spacey's associated
anything related
with
to him
is not good. But yeah, it was one of those things where, in retrospect, you wonder, could you have done more to make something happen? Basically, the record company got something sent to them. It was, I think, a trailer for a movie that was eventually to be American Beauty. They wanted to use the song and they wanted to include the song on the soundtrack, which in my recollection was the sticking point for some reason. that they felt like that would interfere with record sales. And so they turned it down. And we later learned that it was American Beauty, and then went on to win like 7 Oscars. And it was, they apologized to us for that. It was a huge miss. I mean, who's to say whether it would have taken us to the next level, but it certainly felt like a huge missed opportunity. So yeah, I think we're all a little bitter about that one.
Little bitter. Can you give the listeners a little insight into the writing and recording of Beautiful? So people just love that song, and if you could provide any info that people don't know about it, that would be great. So I think it was, you said they already had that song when you auditioned for them. So maybe not so much into the writing, but maybe into the recording, if you remember recording your vocals for it or anything about it.
I remember it specifically. I mean, yeah, so Tony wrote that song. I mean, he is such a gifted songwriter and a gifted wordsmith. We worked it, we worked it so it became all of ours. I remember, so we made that album at a place called Longview Farms in Massachusetts. It was an old converted barn and farmhouse, like with a amazing history. Like lots of bands have recorded there. Aerosmith, the Stones rehearsed there. It was haunted for sure, but just a magical, magical spot. And I don't remember specifically recording that. But I remember that the first version we did, for anybody who knows the song, the chorus is kind of more bombastic, I guess, than, there's like a distorted vocal. And I remember we came up with a version that we thought was like done, and it's heavier than the current version, or as it exists.
And the
now.
Current version, the chorus is pretty heavy. So
yeah, I think this was even more bombastic. And I remember, and we're friends with our old A&R guy, Ian Steeman, but we all remember him sitting in front of the console, because that's where, you'd get the best audio. You'd sit dead center in front of the console, right in between the speakers, blasting the song. And he just would he was listening, and he was just slowly sinking in his chair. And he was, we're like, oh God, that's not a good sign. So we had to kind of go back at it. But the whole experience of recording that album was really magical. Our producer, Ron St. Germain, is like a really special human. And we recorded on tape. So sorry. So, it's all spliced with a razor blade and just done with so much care, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful scene. It was a great experience.
So the final song on that album is called Until, and there's a lyric, until the joy drops again. So did the song come first, or did the band name come first? The joy drop lyric.
No, Tom wrote that song, and that was a little play on words. Yeah, the song came after.
All right, so let's dive into the next album. So in 2001, you guys released Vibrate. Were you guys feeling massive pressure to follow up the success of the first album?
Yeah, I mean, we did, but we wanted to. I mean, we wanted to capitalize on what we had done. I mean, I think every band, when you have a single, it was a single driven era, and a radio driven era. So there's always that pressure to make a song that's palatable to radio. But you don't go into the studio until you've got the songs to do it. So, and we knew that at that point, Sometimes Wanna Die was going to be the leadoff single. I mean, what we wanted though was to do it creatively the way that we wanted to do it. And we actually weren't really allowed to do exactly what we wanted to do. Not at all a slight on Garth Richardson, who ended up being our producer, but we looked at some slightly lesser known producers because we liked their work, and we weren't allowed to work with them because they weren't enough of a name. So, stuff like that. I think every band who works with a record label, you have those kinds of disagreements. But Yeah, it was a very different experience. We recorded it in Vancouver at two studios, the Warehouse Studio and the Armory. So an urban experience. We lived in a house all together, but would go to the studio to record. So a little less kind of earthy, a little less spiritual, more like, okay, you put in your day and then you go home.
And you were there for a couple months in Vancouver recording?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it was 2 or 3 months.
Okay, so Sometimes Wanna Die comes out, it's top 10 hit in Canada. The video with Tommy Lee goes to #1 on Much Music. What was your life at the peak of that single being a hit when you're
So
done snuggling with your dog? Yeah.
he's just, I'm just trying to like keep him, but his breath is absolutely disgusting. Um, I mean, I think as relevant is like the story leading up to that, because we did not also agree, or I didn't agree with the record company's choice of Tommy Lee, which I've told in a couple of podcasts, but it's not a super commonly known story.
Because of the controversy surrounding him with all the different things at that time, or
Yeah, he had been in jail for spousal abuse, which I didn't like. So anyway, I got kind of strong armed by the record company on that one. It ended up that it was really great for the band, but yeah, my moral compass was like a little bit. Um, and then we met Tommy, when we did the video, and he really was lovely, and he really loved the song, and he's just a big kid. So I did end up really liking him. Yeah, it was really cool to have something that was that song was everywhere, and the video was everywhere, and people knew it, and it was just like all of a sudden it felt like we were taking off.
so Sometimes Wanna Die, that music video is where I become aware of Joydrop. So I'm 16 when that music video comes out. And, I remember because there's Tommy Lee. It's a big deal. Love the song. And I still, to this day, I have it on all the playlists that I have. And what's funny is I always thought until, doing my research for the interview with Tony, I always thought that Sometimes Wanna Die was the first single from the second album. And then I would hear Beautiful. And I thought that was the second single from that second album, just because we mentioned Beautiful was bigger in the US and I was really young when it came out. So I had the timeline all wrong. I was like, wow, this is an amazing 1-2 punch of singles. Sometimes Want to Die and Beautiful. I thought, what incredible 2 singles from this album. And I had it all wrong until a few months
Yeah.
ago. So
Yeah, that wasn't the whole story. Yeah, we didn't get a second single from that album.
It's strange because Sometimes Want to Die was a huge single. You assume that buys you, the right to have a second single. Like, what more do you need from a first single to get a second single?
Well, I don't know if Tony told this story, but what happened? Well, first of all, there was a story behind that single not really taking off in the US. It was starting to, and then 9/11 hit, and they took off. Any song with any reference to death was gone from any radio playlist for a long time. So that was that. And I mean, yeah, too bad for us, but I mean, what can you say? But what ended up happening, we Sometimes Want to Die came out. We in Canada, it was going gangbusters. We recorded a French version. That was like a top 5 pop single in Quebec. And then our record company got absorbed by Warner, and that was it. They were no longer in control of our master. Our album just disappeared. It literally disappeared. We lost our record deal, and we didn't own our master, so we couldn't even do anything with it. So we didn't have, we were all ready to put out American Dream Girl as a second single, and just didn't happen. So was it. The rug was pulled out completely.
And that's basically what led to the hiatus, is no support from a label. You're kind of stuck in purgatory.
Yeah, I mean, we we did spend some time together. We wrote some new songs. We kind of tried to solicit interest, but I think we had become fractured as well during that time, and it just didn't, we didn't feel strong enough as a unit to sustain that kind of yeah, like you said, purgatory, like we're just in limbo. And I think you really have to be dedicated to, the project, as a unit. And we weren't.
So some of the good things that came out of that is that the band got nominated for a Juno Award, so Best New Group. What did
Mhm.
that Juno nomination mean to you? You know, Canada's Grammys, that your country acknowledges your hard work, your dedication, your creativity, your passion. What did that mean to you?
I think it meant more later. I don't feel like I understood the magnitude of it at the time. I remember being at the Junos in St. John's, Newfoundland, and obviously wanting it. And, but we had already lost our record deal. It was already weird. The guys, like, nobody had a budget, so the guys couldn't come out and be with me. So if, I think it took a little perspective to be like, okay, wait, that what was a big deal. Like, not everybody can say they were nominated for a Juno, and that's really cool.
And did you guys tour with Big Wreck around that time? Was that for that album release? Do you remember?
Yep. Yep. That was Big Rock would have been our probably last like big Canadian tour.
It's crazy. They're still going. I saw them last year here in Ottawa, and I think next month they're back here in Ottawa again. So
I feel like they're coming down here pretty soon, but I think I have I think I have a game that night. So I don't know if I can go, but I'll look up their dates.
yeah,
Yeah.
your schedule is busy when you work with an NHL team that plays like every 2 nights. You know.
Yeah, I don't do away games, luckily. So God, this dog. Yeah, so that was a fitting way to go out though, because it was a very debaucherous tour. So we did it right. We did it the right way.
That's awesome. So we have some kind words sent in here. This is a member of a band that sold 8 million albums. So this is Dusty Chesterfield, the bass player for the band Saga. And this is what he says. He says,
What?
yeah, yeah. He says, she's great on television. She seems like a really sweet human being who cares deeply about what she does, loves to share her passion amongst others who live for excitement, music, and entertainment. From what I've seen and heard, I think she's great. And I just realized now that she's the one singing Sometimes Wanna Die. So it's from Dusty.
That's super crazy. Thank you for sharing that. That's funny.
There you go. So to me, I went back, I listened to Joydrop's discography, I listened to your solo album. So I'm in the loop with your music career. And to me, the sound quality of this second album sounds like it's a higher level of quality. So
Mhm.
why do you think that is? Was there a bigger budget from the label after the success of the first album? Or did you spend more time or better engineers and mixers and all that stuff?
I think it was analog to digital. The first one, like I said, was done on tape. It was kind of old school. And probably wasn't mastered as, you know, um, loudly. And the second one, we went into the Pro Tools realm and it was mastered like balls to the wall. Um, and so I think that's why it definitely has a much more crystal clarity to it. But if you listen, I think, the first one, if you listen to it, with headphones on with a certain level of volume, I think there's probably more nuance to it. There's no auto tune, everything is like just as performed. So it's just a different kind of listen. But I agree. Like more, our ears are more attuned to the type of album that Vibrate is.
So the last song on the album is called Metasexual. Is this an homage to the name of the first album, or is it a song that was written during the time of the first album that didn't make the first album that was then added to the second album?
Yes, that's true.
The
Yes,
second one? Okay.
it was a song that we played live, but it wasn't on the first album. Is that right? Yes. So then we named the first album Metasexual and then finally recorded it for the second album.
And when you think about the other members in the band, what do you think that they each brought to the table that everybody, as a unit made you guys great?
Um, well, like Tony, I mean, just obviously master drummer. Like seriously, one of the best rock drummers, I think, out there. Master lyricist, master melody maker, clever, like just he's clever. The chord changes are clever. The lyrics and the turn of phrase, it's all clever. Like he's really friggin' smart musically. And also,
it's not, sorry, it's not often that a drummer is also songwriter, that a drummer also has a bunch of solo albums as the lead singer.
yeah,
It's
he's
just super musically talented, like across the
yeah,
music spectrum.
yeah. Everybody should know his name. Tom to me brought a production mind, which makes so much sense because he's now working full time as a producer. So kind of, bigger picture guy. And Tom, I think, was really heart. Like Tom is sort of passion and romanticism and heart. And Thomas, I mean, Thomas now, we haven't spoken in a long time, but he now scores films and does a ton of music stuff for film and theater. Like if you go to Stratford, probably half the shows are his. So just I think he has a type of brilliance. Also just a master craftsman in terms of his songwriting.
And do you have to call one Tom and one Thomas to differentiate them?
We did, yeah. I mean, that's sort of how we differentiated at the time. Now Tom Mackay goes by Thomas
Oh
Mackay.
no.
So yeah.
You got to call the other one Tom now. You got to
Yeah,
switch it
yeah,
back.
yeah.
That's funny. And would you say that with some of the members, you've actually become better friends since the hiatus? Like maybe when you're in the trenches, you can get on each other's nerves, and now you can like love each other from afar. And when you come together, it's even more special.
I think the case with Tom Mackay and Tony and me. Yeah. I think there was, it was hard. It's a grind. And like I said, claustrophobic at times, and you're butting heads about creative things and business things. And with a little bit of space, I think we all got much closer. I mean, Tony and I, in terms of like, day-to-day friendship, we definitely, yeah, we didn't hang out on purpose, I think, when we were in the band, because we were just tired of each other. And then we actually started just hanging out.
All right. So so you mentioned that, the label got absorbed and then the band gets dropped. You're kind of in purgatory. But then in 2017, you guys got back together. You started playing some shows. How good did it feel to reunite with the band and perform live?
It felt the best. It really felt the best. I think that I hadn't realized, that I wasn't experiencing the full potential of joy with the band. I so wish that I could have talked to my 20 something year old self and said, like, just enjoy it. Like, stop wanting the next thing. Stop being dissatisfied with, being number 5. Stop being dissatisfied with, not enough people. Like, just enjoy the ride, because I feel like I internalized the pressure to a point where I didn't, yeah, it was about the goal less than the journey. And so when we reunited, and I mean, so to be clear, we don't speak so much to Thomas. So he was not part of our, Joydrop reunion shows, any of them. But Tom and Tony and myself, yeah, it was super liberating, more fun than I had ever.
And I believe next year is the 25th anniversary of Metasexual. Any plans to celebrate? Maybe just a
No, but
cake?
we keep saying we should. Tony came down to California last or this spring, and we started working on some songs. And I think we definitely have some plans to at least record a few things. We'd like another kick at Beautiful in a different form, and a couple new ones. So I think that, yeah, if I can get my butt to Toronto and we can all convene for a week, then, but a show would be nice too.
So the writing with Tony, was that specifically for Joy Drop or just some songs and they could go wherever?
It was specifically for Joydrop. Yeah. Tom unfortunately couldn't make it. The intention was to have all three of us together, but yeah, no, we want to come up with some new stuff.
So you're thinking maybe a few singles or maybe an EP or something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters, with the digital world. It's like, I mean, sure, it would be nice to make an album, but who's got time for that? So yeah, whatever it turns into. But a few new songs would be nice.
I have one final Joy Drop question. Can you handle one more question with Joy Drop?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is your favorite memory of your time with Joy Drop when you look back to those years? I know there's lots of good times, but anything coming to you right now when I ask?
My favorite memory. I mean, oh boy, there are so many. I mean, I certainly
You can choose a few if you'd
it's
like.
hard to say favorite. I mean, I remember playing our first show and feeling like this is real. Um, the early days, I think when we were just, the sort of romance of it all was like, we were just like, oh my God, it's happening. And I remember signing our record deal in August of 1997, like really quickly, so it's feeling some feelings of accomplishment that we're like, wow, okay, we're really doing this. But I remember, like I said, we sometimes played, it depended on the market and whether our song was being played on the radio. So we could play a full house in, I don't know, Louisville, Kentucky. And then to the next night we played a nobody because our song wasn't being played in that market. So we went to Denver. I remember this distinctly. And it was a free show put on by the radio station. But we got to the venue for sound check and it was big. Like, I don't really, it felt big to us. And we were like, oh my God, if there's not that many people here, this is going to feel terrible. And we did our sound check, we went to eat, and then we got back to the venue and there was a lineup around the block and it was full. And it was just like moments like that are just like, oh, wow, that's for us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have some kind words sent in here. So this is from Bill Wilichka, who is a Much Music
Oh,
VJ, TV personality, and he's now an author. He's out on the road promoting his new book. He was just in Ottawa recently. So he keeps it short and sweet. He says, her strength and conviction is jaw-dropping. I love it, and I love her. So that's from Bill.
I love Bill too, and I haven't seen him in way, way too long. He's a great guy.
It's been a hot minute. So let's talk about Rockstar In Excess. So you were on the reality TV show back in 2005. They were looking for a replacement lead singer for the band In Excess. What was that experience like? Way back in the day, I was on Canadian Idol. I was a finalist. So I know, I know the experience that it looks, I'm sure the experience is fantastic. There's great memories, met lots of great people, but it's not all fun and games. It can be like a boot camp. It can be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Can you pull back the curtains and let our listeners know what that experience was like? You could take that any way you like.
Well, I've been pretty candid about it in spite of the fact that I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but nobody's going to enforce that. It was hard. I mean, first of all, I was unsure as to whether I wanted to do it. Was not during nowadays those shows are so ubiquitous and it's kind of it's a road map to fame or a record deal or whatever. Back then it really wasn't. So I was worried that it would affect my reputation and blah blah blah. So it took some convincing for me to do the show. But it was hard. Like I didn't have any experience singing cover songs. So that in itself was weird for me. Looking back, I would have made so many different choices. I would have understood, oh, okay, don't just pick a song because you like it, but like pick a song that's good for your voice, things like that. We also had cameras on us 24/7 because it wasn't just the music competition that was televised. They had we were on 3 times a week. Scenes from the house. So they were with us always. We were mic'd always.
This was legit reality TV.
This was, yeah. And it was 2005, early days. So they completely isolated us. We were staying at this mansion in Silver Lake in Los Angeles. We weren't allowed any media. So no TV, no access to magazines or newspapers or any current affairs. All of our phone calls were monitored. So people weren't allowed to tell us about what they'd seen on TV. So it was super like we were in the Truman Show, we felt. And they really tried to pit us against each other. But the incredible thing to come out of that show was, first of all, everybody was wildly talented in their own way. So it never felt like we were competing against one another. It felt like we were doing our own thing and we would hope that we would get by. But we never, like, we had so much respect for each other. And it was such a musical experience that I don't think that they didn't really show the public, but we jammed and wrote songs and played music all the time. That was the best thing to come out of it. But, I was definitely, if you're scripting the show, which they do, I was not the character who was going to go very far. I was, they weren't that kind to me. I was in the bottom three a bunch. And so it was hard. It's like, it's a difficult experience when you're afraid for your life. I mean, I say that tongue in cheek, but you're afraid for your musical life. And you're afraid for your tenure on that show every week. So it's tough.
And are there any other contestants that you met on that show that you remain friends today?
I mean, most of us
or
are
at least
still
in
in
touch.
touch.
Yeah.
Most of us are still in touch. But I would say I just saw Ty Taylor like a month ago. He came through with his band. I went to see him. Susie McNeil and I went on to be roommates and really close friends. And I was hoping to see her here with Aerosmith because she sings backing vocals, but that tour got canceled. Still text with her every once in a while, Mig. But we did a Zoom during COVID with almost the entire cast. So on social media, we're always kind of saying hi to each other.
So let's dive into your solo album and then we'll move on to your broadcast career. So in 2007, you released the album Just Look Pretty and Sing. So you worked with Jordan Zadarozny. Hopefully I said that correctly. So with Blinker, the star, he's worked with Courtney Love, Sam Roberts, Mandy Moore. What did he bring to the table for that project?
Well, I was just a huge fan. His album, so Zadarozny, and it's not that easy to say. His band Blinker the Star, I mean, all of us in Joydrop were completely enamored with him and his music. And his album August Everywhere was sort of it was one of our like albums, our tour albums for our second album. So we listened to him all the time. And I kind of knew him from my Montreal days. I knew who he was and I knew he knew who I was. And I was in 2003 at a Queens of the Stone Age concert in Toronto at Lee's Palace. And I ran into him and we started to talk. And I said, oh, well, Joydrop broke up and I'm just trying to figure out what to do. And he's like, well, I just moved back to Canada. I'm living in Pembroke, Ontario. Come up. And so that's when, our friendship was born. And I started to travel to Pembroke by bus on the weekends I don't know if I even really had a job back then. So I would just go for periods of time and we would write songs and record them. And, over the span of a few years, we put together that album. So it had started already in 2003. So it didn't come out till 2007, but yeah, a lot of that stuff had been sitting there.
So Pembroke isn't that far from where I am here in Ottawa. My sister used to do step dancing competitions in Pembroke, and I used to go there. So I'm familiar with Pembroke. So you guys independently made the album and then the Orange label came around after to release it, or?
Yeah, I got a factor grant. So I did that whole thing. So I had some funding, but yeah, I mean, compared to the Joydrop, budgets, which were hundreds of thousands of dollars. I probably put, $15,000 into that one. Initially.
So there were 3 singles. So you had My Little Secret, We Were Stars, and The Perfect Girl. You made music videos for all 3. When you think back to the making of those 3 music videos, are there any memories that come back that are either funny or memorable that you can share?
So My Little Secret, we did a video that just didn't see the light of day. We didn't like how it turned out at all. So ended up going to my dear friend Hill Krakutis, who is a filmmaker. She's she's the first woman to win an engineering Juno. So she's like, I can do this for like $4,000. So that's how that video came about. She just like put together a treatment and we shot it. I mean, it was just like skin of our teeth, but I actually loved it. We Were Stars. I think we had a bigger like video fact grant, and I think it's a really pretty video. And then The Perfect Girl is like, it's a little bit blue. I don't know. Have you seen it? Have you watched that video?
So My Little Secret, that's the black and white one.
That's the
We Were
black and white
Stars
one.
is in the cafe. Is that right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then The Perfect Girl, you're getting out of bed. Is that right?
Yeah. There's like, it's like kind of sexy.
A little steamy.
It's, I wouldn't show that to like, you know, my boyfriend. I don't think he's watched it.
Yeah,
I don't think I'd want him to.
that's all good. That's all
Yeah.
good. That's funny. So I don't know where to go from there, but listening to the album, there's some great harmonies. Has hearing harmonies and singing harmonies always come easy to you, or is that something you had to work on?
No, I think it's come fairly easily to me. I think I have a good ear for that stuff. I think choral singing absolutely helps. You know, that's like the more you do something, the more you are surrounded by something, the more it becomes part of you. So yeah, I think I have generally good pitch, but harmony, just I hear it.
So I
And
have a
Jordan is a harmony guy too.
Okay, so I have a hypothetical question for you. So let's pretend that we've gone 200 years, 500 years into the future, and most of today's music has been erased from human consciousness. But somehow there's one Joydrop song and one Tara Slone solo song that
Ooh.
survives, that people still listen to. If you
Mhm.
could choose one song from each project that you think best represents your music and your band, what would you choose? So it doesn't have to be a single, doesn't have to be the biggest hit, but just for you, what would you choose?
So I think I'd have to go with Beautiful. I think I think it represents us musically and represents kind of our vision of the world and what we stood for. And then the Tara Sloan song that comes to me is a song that was not a single. It's a song I'm just really proud of, and I think it's beautiful, and it's called Adore.
Good choices. Good choices. We have a lot of young musicians that listen to this podcast, and I've had some fan questions sent in from like 7-year-olds to show how young some of these musicians are.
Mm-hmm.
So for those young musicians that are dreaming of having a career in the music industry, is there any advice that you can provide to them? It's not the easiest of industries. There are no guarantees. It's not the safe choice.
Mm-hmm.
Any advice you can share that might help them take the right steps?
I mean, it's what I say to media students who come and talk to me also. It's like, you better love it, right? Because this isn't an easy journey. And if you're going to invest this much time and effort, I hope you love it. But it is about reps. I think that I wouldn't have the first clue how to go about getting noticed right now. So I certainly can't advise anyone how to make it on TikTok. Like I'm not on TikTok. I'm too old for that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, what Joydrop did, spending all that time in the rehearsal room, spending all that time honing your craft in various ways. At the end of the day, that's what's going to rise to the top. Yes, sure. Some people are fluky. Some people, have something that goes viral. But if you really love it, then it's about the craft, and you have to invest the time and effort. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah, whether it's wanting a career in music or acting or television or entrepreneurship, they say what you say, which is you better love it and be willing. It has to be something you'd be willing to do for free because you love it so much, because most
Mhm.
likely you will be doing it for free for a long time. So
Yeah, and I just think that there's a sort of instant gratification culture that we have, especially right now, because things go viral, and because of the internet. You can be, insta famous like real quick. Um, but anybody with any kind of staying power, you've got to have the goods.
So we have some kind words sent in here from Chris Broadbeck, the bass player and singer for C Spot Run. I was a massive fan of their
Oh,
single
nice.
Waitlist back in the day. So Chris says, first, this might be controversial. First and foremost, Tara is a Habs fan. And that says a lot. I've known Tara as a singer and have shared a few venues both on stages and on television. She's very unpretentious and always professional. I like that she speaks her mind and stands up for what she believes in, and you can't say that about many people, especially those in the public eye. So that's from Chris.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, with you currently with the San Jose Sharks, we can't tell people that you're, a Habs fan, but that's you were in Montreal, so you're
Ah,
allowed. Just like I'm in Ottawa,
yeah.
you're just naturally an Ottawa Senators fan.
My family is from Montreal. So that's how I grew up. And my love of hockey also comes from, my dad and watching Hockey Night in Canada when I was a kid. So yeah, no. And luckily they're in a different conference. So hang on. I'm just answering. My daughter just got home from school, wondering if I have the dog. Um, yeah. So I think it's okay. It's okay to say I grew up a Habs fan.
So let's dive into your broadcasting career. So it starts in 2010. You were the host for Breakfast Television on City TV Calgary. And we have a fan question. So this is from Mike Lamonde, who covered Beautiful and sent in a comment earlier. So his question is, how hard was it to transition from a career in music to a career in TV?
So actually, my first job was preceded Breakfast Television. I worked at a little station called Sun TV in Toronto, starting in 2007. So around the time that I put out my solo album, and really just struggled. I was done with the struggle, and I was done selling myself, and I just felt like I wanted something that I didn't want to tour anymore, all that stuff. So I had luckily compiled enough TV experience to put together a little reel, and it was Michael Landsberg who helped me put that together. I had done a lot of his show Off the Record, so I had some clips of that. And then after Rockstar, a lot of Canadian entertainment shows started using me as like little, guest host spots or whatever. So I got a job at that little station, and my first beat was entertainment. So that was a smooth transition because I knew that world really well. Um, but I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to learn on the job at the station, where I learned to produce, I learned to write, I learned to read a teleprompter. The hardest transition for me was going from a life that was a nighttime life to like a day job. I mean, first, I had the only jobs I'd done kind of intermittently were bar jobs or restaurant jobs. And then other than that, I was, a touring musician. So that was the hardest adjustment. And I would also say for me, I felt a loss of identity. I was Tara the musician, I was Tara the Joydrop singer. And then all of a sudden I felt like I wasn't anymore. So that was a bit of a reckoning for me.
And do you think that the experience in the music industry really helped you with the broadcasting? So, being in front of cameras, doing interviews in front of crowds, being a public figure, do you think that all really helped?
I think it absolutely helped. I mean, it's sort of, I also went to theater school. I'd done episodic TV and film. So, luckily I had a lot of that experience. But I will tell you that to this day, nothing makes me more nervous than TV, which is crazy because I have done some, when I think about doing Rockstar and Excess and those like performances and how many people would have been watching. But yeah, music, I don't have nerves. I have excitement, but TV, I get nervous still.
I can understand that, because the music, it's like, you know exactly what you're going to do, but TV, it's like you have to be super prepared. You have to be,
Yeah.
do your research, be educated. And you're talking a lot, so there's room to stumble with your words. Music, you're just getting up and doing what you're great at.
Yeah, and often you have a band, right? So you kind of feel like you have a posse, but yeah. Anyway, it's interesting. I've never managed to fully kick that nerve thing.
So in 2014, you become the co-host of Rogers Hometown Hockey. Man, what an opportunity. How did that present itself?
So I was at Breakfast Television in Calgary. City TV, which is the station that had breakfast television, was owned by Rogers. Rogers also owned Sportsnet. So I had already created a relationship with Sportsnet and was doing some smaller jobs for them there with the intention of moving into sports full time if the right opportunity arose. And I remember being at the breakfast television desk and getting a press release that said Rogers secured the NHL rights for the next 12 years. And here's this show it was like a very, scant, sparse description. But there's a show called Rogers Hometown Hockey. Ron McLean will host. It will tour Canada telling local hockey stories. And so I immediately threw my hat into the ring. I sent a letter to the president of Sportsnet at the time, Scott Moore, asked him to consider me. He said, well, I think it's a great idea, but let me talk to, the executive producer and blah, blah, blah. So it was several months back and forth. And then they're like, yes, join us. So the first season, I did half the shows. I was still on breakfast television. I was more of a reporter. And then the second season, they offered it to me full time.
So there's been some kind words sent in from these incredible world-class musicians. But this next quote is going to be the quote of all quotes, because this is from my dad. So bear with me here, because on Tuesday night, I went to a concert, brought my dad, and while we're driving there, I just said, hey, do you know Tara Slone? He's a big hockey fan, right? So, hey, I assumed he didn't know Joydrop because he's like into classic rock. But I said, hey, do you know Tara Slone? And here's what he said. He said, of course I know her. They'd send her to whatever town was being featured in the hockey broadcast, and she'd always be beaming with enthusiasm and positivity. Very articulate, a real joy. So the quote of all quotes from
Oh,
Dennis Martin. There you go.
yay. That's so nice.
So I thought you'd get a kick out of that more than anything. And we have a fan question from Stephanie Myers. Her question is, how was it working with a Canadian icon like Ron McLean? I feel like that alone would
Yeah.
when you see this, the opportunity, just no matter what it is, if it says Ron McLean, it's like, wow, okay, that's a life changer.
Yeah, I mean, there's no simple answer. I mean, Ron is an icon for a reason. There is nobody, I just don't think there's anybody better than him. There's nobody who's more naturally gifted. He's just a master orator. He just he never stumbles. He can go on crazy tangents, and we all know that he does, but he always ties things up in a bow at the end. He's just so good. So at the beginning for me, it was intimidating because like I've had big time imposter syndrome and what am I doing here? But I will tell you that he is a very generous broadcaster. He is not proprietary about anything like, oh, I'm going to say this because this is my information. His intention is always to do justice to the story and do justice to the community. He had more faith in me, I think, than I did. There's a certain level of precision that he demands. And I think sometimes for people, producers, me, like that can be hard. But generally, I mean, we were so invested in that show. And it's not just him, it's everybody involved in that broadcast. It was such a unique experience and such a unique group of people. I don't know if I'll ever work with a more tightly knit and caring group. Everybody wanted to make the communities proud. So but Ron, I mean, he is who he is for very good reason.
That's one of the great qualities of a leader is they believe in you before you believe in yourself, and they believe in you long enough that you can then believe in yourself because they did.
Yeah. Yep. He never had a doubt.
So, you recently had an introspective post about turning 50, and I saw
Mhm.
that around that time you had this birthday party at a venue. You played some Joydrop songs. Tony was there playing, and Ron McLean was there as well. What did it mean to you to have Ron McLean come out to your birthday party and show support? Not a lot of people can have a birthday party, and Ron McLean's there.
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, I mean, Ron would always come if he was able to. So, I was just glad that he wasn't, somewhere in Canada, being asked to speak somewhere. So, yeah, he's been a really good friend. He's been a big fan of Joydrop, and in fact, we performed on Hometown Hockey. Um, that was, I think, before we even did a full live show. We did a we did an episode in Guelph, Ontario. So, and that was at his behest, really. There was no part of me that was like, let me get my band back together and put it on our show. It was totally his idea.
So I'm 38. Can you think back to the last 12 years of your life? And is there any wisdom that you can share with me that I can better live my next 12 years?
Well, I
What
mean,
am I doing wrong here, Tara? Like, what's the
I
secret to
don't know.
happiness? What is the meaning of life?
I really don't know. But I'll tell you that one thing that I wish I had been better at, and I'm still learning, is how to say no. And creating boundaries for myself. Really bad at that. And when you work on a show like breakfast television, where you're constantly generating ideas, when you work on a show like Hometown Hockey, where everybody's so inspired, I just was really bad at giving myself downtime and personal space. And, I think even carving space out for my family, I think I really became quite consumed. Um, so if I would say, part of what defined the last 12 years, like, yes, sure, my career was gangbusters. Um, but I didn't have a good balance. So I would say boundaries. Turn off your phone. Don't answer that text. Don't answer that email. Just really carve out the space for yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah, saying no is actually saying yes to the things that are most important to you, right? Having, a
Totally.
great opportunity present itself and you can actually do it because you said no to something else that was less important.
Yeah, I think I lived a lot of my life in fear of like, oh, if I say no, I'm a people pleaser, right? If I don't say yes, then they're not going to like me or they're not going to ask me next time or I'm not going to get this. Um, but it was always sort of something is sacrificed when that's the way you approach things.
And what was your favorite part of doing Rogers hometown hockey?
I mean, aside from the camaraderie, which was really unparalleled, um, I mean, I just feel like it was such a privilege being welcomed into all of these communities and people would share their stories and their lives with us. It kind of got to a point where like, we were telling some really difficult stories sometimes. Stories about residential schools and stories about sickness and death and like a lot of um we were sort of part of healing for people in some way. And that's no small responsibility. And I just think like how fortunate were we to have been given this vehicle and this platform to have people trust us with their stories. It was really remarkable.
So the show came to an end last year. Did that catch you off guard? Did it have to do with the pandemic and the lockdowns? Like you couldn't actually get to these cities and interact with people?
Yeah, I mean that was part of it. I think that was the proverbial nail in the coffin. We were taken off the road like everybody else in March of 2020. The next year, we weren't on the road at all. Then we got back on the road and then we were taken off the road and they switched our night and it just everything started to kind of feel not good. We saw the writing on the wall. And, I mean, listen, I don't know that I could have done it any longer anyway, just for myself. I don't know. I feel like Ron could have done it forever.
He's a
Um,
machine.
but I think he's also really grateful to just have some space now. So no, it was not a surprise. And I had already, knowing that that was coming, had already been, you know, I had a relationship in the Bay Area, thinking, well, maybe that's a move I could make, but I need to have a job. So I'd already, I'd been having conversations with the people in San Jose.
And when that came to an end, did it feel like a breakup or the death of something beautiful? I mean, 8 years is a long time, whether
Mm.
it's a job or a relationship.
Oh, I felt so much grief, so much grief. Unexpected. I mean,
Hmm.
because even though I expected the end, I didn't expect the grief part. Yeah, and I honestly felt really, I felt like we went out with a whimper and we deserved more. I feel like people just found out that we were canceled. There was no, Rogers didn't send out a press release or a thank you. And I felt really slighted by that. I think for all the people, and there are hundreds of people, because we were a traveling festival as well. So there were people on the ground, you know, driving trucks and spending 6 months of their lives on the road through rural Saskatchewan in the winter. Like I felt on behalf of Rogers with Rogers' name, doing meet and greets with politicians. And I felt, and I still feel resentful that there wasn't a just they yeah there wasn't just an acknowledgement. It didn't have to be a thank you, but an acknowledgement of like this group who represented this company in this way for this long. So that pissed me off.
Do
But
you feel like one final celebration episode kind of would have tied it up with a nice bow?
um no, I just the acknowledgement I think would have been enough. Like I think we all kind of knew that last episode. It did go out with a whimper because it was like we were out west. Anyway, it just was a weird show. It was on a Monday and we were on the air at like 3 before kids got out of school. So the whole thing was just kind of messed up. Um, but yeah, and I feel its absence also on the hockey landscape. I like people still will message me and say, hey, like I have this story about this person and who's doing this behind the scenes. I'm like, do you know who I could talk to about it? I'm like, no, nobody's doing those stories. That was us. That's what we did.
So in 2020, you became the host of the Sportsnet docuseries Top of Her Game. So you focus on women's rights. Why is that important to you, women's rights?
Well, I'm a woman and I've just always, I mean, for me, equality and equity has always it's always hit me in the heart. Ever since I was a kid, I just feel inequity really profoundly. Um, and specifically during the pandemic, when there were no live sports happening, I remember scrolling through, sportsnet.ca and TSN, and like, there's still no stories about women's sports, and women's sports are out there. But if you don't talk about them and you don't show them to people, nobody's going to know they exist and they can't grow. So there was an absence of material. There was nothing to show on TV. So it was just a little, I could take advantage of the fact that live sports were on hold and there's something that I could do.
So after 48 episodes of interviewing powerful and inspiring women, what would you say are your biggest takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway is, I mean, there's just no end of remarkable people. I think a lot of women are tired of being the first and only, and certainly want that to change. Um, I think women as well as, people of color and just anybody who's, um, who for whom sport is not designed, everyone has to work like 10 times harder. Um, but that women's sports are out there and they're growing, and it's just a matter of, the stories are there to be told. You just got to tell them.
Can you talk about the Budweiser Stage at Home series? So this was in response to concerts shutting down during the summer. Uh, for our listeners that maybe aren't aware of that series, can you
Yeah,
touch on that?
that was really cool. I mean, still, that's such a surreal time. So, Budweiser Stage is an amphitheater in Toronto. All the biggest acts come through there in the summer. And of course, the entire summer concert season was canceled. So, Live Nation and MLSE, in conjunction with City TV, decided to do a series where they would have artists, record sets from their homes or rehearsal studios or wherever. And then I would have the chance to do interviews with them. And I hosted from Budweiser Stage, but there were no bands there, sort of. So yeah, did we do 8 episodes of that? It was really neat. I mean, it was really fun for me to combine music and, my first love with TV and, to also stay busy during the pandemic. But yeah, it's no fun. It's no fun working with masks. And I mean, the whole thing was just so difficult.
So I'm going to blast through the list of performers that were on the show. So the Black Crows, the Trues, Blue Rodeo, Alan Doyle, Bare Naked Ladies, Walk Off the Earth, John Legend, Dallas Smith, Dean Brody, City and Color, Leon Bridges, Alanis Morissette, The Beaches, and the Arkells. I mean, what a list! You got to interview these bands.
Yeah, there was only one in-person interview, I think, which was City and Color, which was really, I was like so starved for human interaction. So that one's my favorite just because I actually got to sit across from Dallas. But it was super cool. Actually, Alanis might be my favorite. We had a really great talk.
Ottawa's own, Ottawa's
Yeah.
own.
Yeah, she's so cool.
I saw her not this summer, but last summer. She was one of the headliners at Blues Fest here in Ottawa, which was awesome.
I saw her here at a place called Shoreline Amphitheater, and she was phenomenal, like ridiculously good.
I being in Ottawa, so her family's here. I remember when I was, I don't know, 12 or 14, maybe younger, I went to a songwriting workshop and it was her dad, Alan Morissette,
Huh,
and Alanis's sister. So it's so funny. So Alan Morissette names his daughter Alanis, which is kind of cool. So anyways, that
right.
was a weird Ottawa experience. But so for your work with Budweiser Stage at Home, you received a Canadian Screen Award nomination for Best Host in a Talk Show or Entertainment News Series. So you had already received a Juno nomination. So that's your work in music. So was this nomination super special because this was in a new field? This is now in the broadcasting entertainment side.
Yeah, I mean, all these things are a feather in your cap. This one was super unexpected. We had a couple of nominations for hometown hockey, none of which we won, which makes me sad. But yeah, it's a nice little like, hey, I do that too.
I feel like especially during the pandemic where there's so much like negativity and bad stuff going around that to have an award nomination is just like extra sweet, something positive coming
Yeah,
out of it.
yeah, it was a big surprise.
So let's talk about the San Jose Sharks. So this is what you're currently up to. So last year you moved to California and you became the host and content contributor for the San Jose Sharks. How happy were you to be back with an NHL team doing hockey?
I mean, I feel so lucky that I moved to California and I live in the center of the tech universe. But I managed to score like the 2 hockey jobs that I could have possibly gotten. So, it's great. I mean, it's a different experience for me. I work for the team itself and I do a podcast and some video series and some other random things. And then I also work for NBC Sports Bay Area. So I do games. So I do some rinkside reporting and then I do some pre and post game hosting. So I'm doing like a little bit of everything, which keeps it interesting and fun and new. And it's also different. I've never worked for a team before. And I've never done a regional broadcast where you work, like hometown hockey would be a different matchup every week. This is like you're talking Sharks all the time. So it's all new. It's fun.
And You mentioned the podcast. So I see two podcasts, so The Undercurrent and Making Waves. Can you share the distinction between the two? They're both to do with the San Jose Sharks, is that correct?
So the Undercurrent is audio. Making Waves is a video feature series. So they're quite similar in intention, I guess, to sort of feature people. Making Waves is more specifically Bay Area people in hockey who are kind of going above and beyond to help grow the game. The Undercurrent is some Bay Area, some Sharks centric stuff, but also, the greater hockey community. Like this week, I'm going to be interviewing the guys who founded Pride Tape, stuff like that.
So it when I follow your social media, it looks like you're having a lot of fun with your new co-host for the TV stuff with the Sharks. It seems like they make you laugh. It seems like they're a good time. Are you starting to get a little of that camaraderie that you had with the other hockey broadcasts that you were doing? I mean, that takes time to develop those relationships, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, when I do the rinkside stuff, I'm basically alone, right? Like I'm the reporter, so I'm alone. Yeah, the studio stuff is fun and lends itself a little bit more. The stuff you've seen is probably with Curtis Brown, who actually moved to Nebraska, so he's not with the broadcast
How
anymore.
dare he?
I know. But it is fun. I don't know. There's a certain lightness to it. In fact, that hometown hockey didn't have, because hometown hockey was we had so little time to get so much information in. So there just wasn't room for banter. And so, but when you have a pregame intermissions and postgame about the San Jose Sharks, especially like when they're not doing so great and you might not have that much to talk about, there's just a little room for giddiness, which to me harkens more back to my breakfast television days, which I enjoy.
And how has your experience been so far in California? I mentioned to you, I sent you a message saying, I think you're living the dream, because in the winter, you can watch a hockey game and you can go outside and get a tan, which is not normal for us Canadians.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a beautiful part of the world. It's not LA, so we do have winter. It's a rainy season more than it actually did snow kind of once. It was quite an anomaly. We had a very wet winter, and it can get windy and stormy. But there's something in bloom here always. The landscape is magical. I do a lot of hiking here. I can go and talk to the redwoods, which I do. It's just having that access to nature is unbelievable. So as far as places to live, yes, it is extraordinary. I mean, I miss Canada. I never thought I would live in the United States. There's certain things about Canada that I will always treasure and feel more connected to. But if you got to live somewhere in the US, this is
Not a bad place.
No.
So you've had a lengthy career in the entertainment industry. How do you keep this fun? You look like you're enjoying what you do after all these years.
I mean, I think it's first of all, doing something new is fun. I'm lucky enough to have new experiences, and certainly being at games is extra fun for me because I didn't get to do that in my previous hockey life. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm lucky enough to be able to keep it fun. And I think, being curious and engaged, and sort of caring keeps it fun.
So I have one final quote sent in. Can you handle kind words just one more time? Can you handle it, or is it too much? Am I laying it on too thick?
No, bring it.
Right. Okay. So this is from Rich Bedeau, who's an iconic Canadian drummer, former drummer for Finger 11 for Santa Sonia. He's recently been playing shows in Europe with Daughtry, which is huge, right? Sold millions of albums. So this is what Rich has to say. He says, before I got to know Tara, I admired her from afar. We played a show together in Florida at some festival that Everlast headlined, and I couldn't believe the star power she had. She had the voice, the stage persona, and the confidence of a superstar. As the years went on, we became great friends. She's the most beautiful human being, and it's been incredible to watch her career flourish as a TV personality. Everything she does 200%, not 100, 200%. I absolutely love you, Tara, and cherish our friendship. I think you need to be prime minister one day. So
oh my God, I can't imagine anything worse than being in politics. That's really kind and sweet. And I miss Rich and I haven't seen him in so long. Yeah. It's really nice.
So we like to end the interviews with a rapid fire section. So I just blast through questions. You answer as quickly as possible, and we'll tie this up with a nice bow. Is that okay?
Yes, it sounds good. And Archie's
And
still,
and
he's
we
been in
got
my lap the whole
the
time.
whole time. We
Yeah.
couldn't even see him. I didn't. That might be the quietest dog ever, especially as a puppy. So,
Yes, he's a good boy.
all right, rapid fire questions. What are the things outside of music that bring you joy?
My daughter. Um, the world, the phenomenal world, ordinary magic of like nature and stars and outside of music though, because
Music is everything. Yeah.
music is a big one. Um, yeah, I think just other helping other people and seeing other people thrive too.
What is your craziest, sweetest, funniest, or most memorable fan interaction over the years?
God, there's so many sweet ones. I mean, there are people who say, I was on the verge of taking my life and I listened to Beautiful and it got me through. Or, I was the only gay kid in school and, your song got me through high school. And then, there's the girls who would like ask me to sign their boobs, things like that.
That's memorable.
Yeah.
If you had your dream pick of musicians to form a super group, who would you pick? So we would say you're on vocals, pick a drummer, guitarist, bass player.
Oh my God.
Good luck.
Oh my God. Can people I know or people I don't know or like,
Anyone, super group. Like you could take the greatest musicians of all time.
okay. Oh wow. Can I just like put myself in Led Zeppelin?
Yes. So
Okay.
Robert Plant, Take a Hike.
Yeah, I'd put myself in Led Zeppelin or put myself alongside Josh and be in Queens of the Stone Age.
That'd be pretty badass in Queens of the Stone Age. The best concert I've ever seen in my life was Queens of the Stone Age opening for Nine Inch Nails, if you talk about
Oof.
great double bills. And I saw them twice, like two different festivals. I guess I'll just ask, what's the best concert you've ever seen?
So, seen some good ones. But the one that I kind of hold in my mind is the best show I've ever seen. And I will acknowledge that there were maybe some chemicals in my body in the form of LSD.
People told you the next day that you had a great time.
Yeah, no, I know. I remember it, but I think it was a little bit heightened. Soundgarden on the Bad Motorfinger tour at the Spectrum in Montreal. Like I was like Chris Cornell was the Messiah. He just looked like a fucking god. And the music was so powerful and loud. And that album is just so good.
And that venue is not an arena. That's like 2,000 or 3,000 people. So it's surprisingly intimate, I think.
Yeah. And I was right up front.
Does your daughter think her mom is a rock star or just some schmuck at home?
Oh, yeah. She thinks I'm cringy.
You're the queen of cringe?
I'm the
That's what
queen
she
of
thinks.
cringe. Oh, yeah. Like she won't even, she wanted me to take, she wanted me to take her to a movie theater, which is about 20 minutes from the house. And I said, okay, well, I'll just take you and you go to your movie with your friends and I'll go to a different movie. And she said, no, I'm not going to go.
Even
Like
in a different
I
theater.
couldn't
Wow.
even be in a different theater.
How dare you, daughter? In what way did having a daughter change you as a person?
I think you stop becoming the center of your own universe. Your orbits definitely change.
Can you think of a song that you wish you wrote?
Oh my God, there's so
Just anything that comes to mind.
many. Okay, well, I just posted about this, so it's the first thing that comes to mind is I guess that's why they call it The Blues by Elton John. And I think it's a Bernie Taupin. I think so. Anyway, I just heard it like the other day and I was so blown away by it. But there's so many.
What's the biggest concert you've ever played, and what was it like to play to a crowd of that size? You mentioned you played to 30,000 people at one point. Would that be the biggest?
Probably. I mean, that's the show that Rich Beto mentioned. That was, I think, in Fort Myers, Florida. And that was a festival. That was probably like 25,000 people.
And
Pretty.
what for us peasants that have never played to that many people, what's it like? You get up there, what's it like? 25,000 people. Do you
It's
have to
so
how
cool.
you perform because it's like a faceless sea of people, or
Yeah, I think it kind of gives you permission to just kind of go big, Like you can be like put on the whole rock star thing. You just do it.
which band or musician were you the biggest fan of before sharing a bill with them? So was there anyone you were super fan of and you ended up on the same festival or opening for them?
I was a pretty Big Rec fan. I mean, I there are definitely like, bands like Deftones that we played with and um trying to remember. I mean, we played with a lot of bands, but definitely as a like straight up musician, I remember when that song came out. And I was just like, holy shit, that's a song. That's a song I wish I'd written.
Are there any other bands out there that our listeners should be aware of? So maybe a band you think is great that maybe isn't as big as it should be?
Well, I do think Blinker the Star is absolutely underappreciated. Oh my gosh.
I
I
wrote
mean,
down the name
I
of
don't know
that
if,
album so that I can go back and listen to it. The Blinker
yeah.
Star album you suggested.
That I'd have to think about. I'm trying to think of what I just saw the band Sylvan Esso play live and they absolutely blew me away. So they're pretty big, but I think they should be big.
Are there any artists that you listen to that would shock our listeners? Like any guilty pleasures? There's some great Bieber albums, there's some great Tay Tay albums, Taylor Swift. Anything you listen to that would be surprising to us?
I don't put on Olivia Rodrigo on my own because my daughter plays her like pretty incessantly, but she impresses me.
Her first, not the new album that just came out, but the one before that, Sour, I thought was the
Mm.
album of the year. I thought it was up for the Grammy for best album of the year, and I thought it should have won, and it didn't. But
I
that's an
think
incredible album.
the new one's really good too. Like I am super impressed by her. My guilty pleasures are more like old stuff, like yacht rock stuff.
Hmm. What would you change about the music industry if you had a magic wand? I know there's a lot. This
Oh
could be a
boy.
long answer, but just I guess anything that comes to you that you would change.
I mean, I just wish that I think there are so many deserving people and acts that just don't make it. um, so I wish that there was just some magical way of like, the people who are really truly talented just getting their just desserts.
What are the top misconceptions that people have about musicians?
That they're lazy, that they're only in it for, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, there's truth to that, but musicians work so frigging hard at their craft and maintaining their craft. And yeah, there's just so much more that goes on behind the scenes, I think. And that maybe they're not as, musicians are smart people, and creative minded. There's a lot of creative minded brilliance that people probably don't recognize.
Final three rapid fire questions. If you could sit down for a conversation with anyone, who would it be?
David Bowie.
What is your biggest fear?
Dying.
That's a legit fear. What would be, speaking of dying, what would your final death row meal be? So obviously you are wrongfully accused. You find yourself on death row. You can choose a meal, a drink, a dessert. What do you choose?
So this is going to sound ridiculous. I think I would have like a giant thing of poutine, but it'd have to be like really good,
The
like from
squeaky
like
cheese curds from Quebec?
yeah, like it'd have to be like authentic from like Le Petite Patate or whatever, somewhere on the roadside.
Yeah, La Belle Province or one of those.
I've had my fair share of those. Yeah.
You know what? I had so Dan Todd, the drummer for Honeymoon Suite and Platinum Blonde, his answer was a hot dog. And I was so offended. So now any answer someone gives is always better. Like the bar's been set so low with a hot dog that, his
That's
final death
hilarious.
row meal was a hot dog and like a lemonade or something. I'm like, your final death row meal you could get at like a cheap baseball game. Like that's so heartbreaking. But
Yeah. No, I'd have poutine and a really nice glass of Cabernet Sauvignon.
that's a strange combo, but we'll let that slide. So, final few questions. These are deeper questions. They don't have to be rapid fire answers. Do you still have any dreams in your heart that you're working towards that you have not yet accomplished?
Um, yeah, I think I do. Um, my dream is to find the next thing that's gratifying. Um, so I don't know if that counts because I don't know what it is. I know that I don't think I'm going to stay on TV forever. My dream is, to be more, I think more of benefit to the world, like to find something that can sustain me both financially and keep my heart afloat. My dream is to allow myself to feel contentment. And that's a very sort of, it's a big, deep answer, but I think I'm not very good at like being content in the moment. I think I don't see the forest for the trees like I didn't in Joydrop. I mean, I don't know if this is a dream. My greatest accomplishment or my greatest wish is that my daughter experiences joy in her life. So
that's a very selfless answer. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
I mean, like my daughter again, I just that just is surpasses and supersedes any work or accolade or whatever. But I think I'm proud of myself for being a bit of a shapeshifter. I think that I tend to if I see something ahead of me, an opportunity, whatever it is, a challenge, and I will regret not having done it, then I tend to do it, whatever the consequence. And I think I've been able to kind of morph my way to this point anyway.
Final question. If you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could whisper words of advice, taking all the life lessons you've learned, the experiences and the mentorships and the dreams achieved and the failures, if you can just give a little advice to cute little Tara sitting there at 10 years old to help guide her through this human experience, what do you say to her?
I would say trust your intuition. I would say use your voice. Not just your singing voice, but when you know something is amiss, when you know something is wrong, when you feel something deeply, say something. I would say enjoy the journey. It's about the journey, not the goal. And I would say be kind and forgiving to yourself. That that self-flagellation and regret is a bit of a waste of time, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and it's the only way to learn.
And is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have supported you all the way from the start, from your music career with Joydrop, your solo career, through to the TV broadcasting, the fans that have been with you the whole journey? Anything you'd like to say to them?
That it's extremely humbling. It's just, I'm grateful that people care at all. And I care back. I don't take anybody's friendship or devotion or any of that attention for granted at all. So just gratitude.
So as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a singer. I want to thank you for the amazing music you've created over the years with Joydrop and your solo career. This is music I still listen to today. So we talked about it's been 27 years, so it's been a big part of my life. I want to say thank you for being a beacon of hope for the dreamers out there, because you dreamed big in probably two of the hardest career choices you could choose, and you found a way to find success in both of those. So you've shown the rest of us what's truly possible here. I want to acknowledge you for having the courage to speak up, to speak your mind when you know something needs to be said. You're someone that's out there that people can look to, that they know they can trust to speak the truth. And then last but not least, I want to thank you for this interview, for sitting down with me for the last 2 hours. I mentioned I'm a fan. I go back to maybe not the first album because I was too young, but back to the second album, Sometimes Want to Die. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I had so many questions and they're finally answered. So I'm going to say baby tonight. So Tara, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Well, Joelle, thank you. And thank you for your attention to detail, and this takes a lot of research and energy. And it absolutely flew by, and he did okay.
Oh, there. He's the real star of the show.
It's so ridiculous, this dog. But yeah, thank you for even being interested. It's very humbling.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the kind words. And to the fans, thanks for tuning in. To the Terra fans, the Joydrop fans, to the San Jose Sharks fans, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you on the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.